Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Revolution Recap. The Revolution started the 2021 season with a punch to the gut after falling down 2-0 within the first 10 minutes. But goals from Tajon Buksa and Gustavo Bo drew the Revolution level by halftime, and that score held firm through the final whistle. We also saw Wilfred Captu make his Revs debut, Edward Kizza hitting the crossbar late in the game, and DeJuan Jones being red-carded and nearly giving away a costly penalty kick. I'm Greg Johnstone. Joining me today is Sean Donahue. Sean, how is it going?
Doing all right. It was at the least a very entertaining opening night for the Revolution. So that was kept us on the edge of our seats with the way that game was going back and forth.
And also joining us today is the Bent Musket's refereeing expert. We had to bring him in for this game recap, Jake Catanese. Jake, how are you doing?
Morning, everyone. Glad to be back.
Yeah, you actually just woke up because you have that night shift schedule. So we appreciate you interrupting your sleep to join us here today.
It is the morning, right? Hang on, let me check my clock. I never look at this thing. I never know what time it is.
It's the morning on the West Coast.
It counts. Totally counts.
Also, just a warning to our listeners that I got the second dose of the vaccine yesterday, so if I seem a little off today, I promise I'm not drunk or tired. I'm just a little distracted because I'm also shopping for Microsoft products while we do this because I have a real sudden urge to go through these. So, Sean, while I finalize this purchase of my brand new Microsoft Surface Pro, can you tell me what your key takeaway from last night's game is?
Yeah, I think my key takeaway is going to be one that a lot of people had from this game, which is that the defense may not be as good as we hoped it was going into this season. And a lot of that was, I think, the disappointment and kind of the play of the fullbacks. And, you look defensively across the back line, I think you can pick out some errors from every player out there. Brandon Bye maybe the least amount of defensive errors, but his passing percentage was 56.8%. And when you complain about the Revolution's struggling to keep possession, that was certainly part of it. And then DeJuan Jones, we'll talk about the red card later and whether or not that was fair. But that aside, I didn't think he had a good game at all. He didn't combine well with Tajon Buchanan on the left flank in the first half. And, I'm not sure he was that much better in the second half either when things changed. And I do wonder, too, if maybe we gave him some credit from, Teal Bunbury being his partner on the left side. And we all know Teal's a guy that tracks back a lot and provides a lot of defensive coverage. And the two of them worked well together. So there's a lot of questions right now I have about the fullbacks. And, if Christian Mafla can't step up and doesn't get fit, we know he's got a reputation for being injury prone. If he doesn't stay healthy and can kind of step up and overtake that spot from DeJuan Jones, I have a lot of questions on how good this back line can be. With that said, I don't think it helped the Revolution that, Henry Kessler was away with the Olympic team for a while and they didn't have a full preseason to get everything together. But this was the back line, that we saw a lot of at the beginning of last season. So it's not like these guys were unfamiliar with each other. But, just going through them, the key negative I thought was DeJuan Jones, but Henry Kessler didn't have a good game. Bruce Arena actually called him out a bit after the game for not having a good game. Bruce Arena said Andrew Farrell had a good game. I thought Andrew Farrell wasn't great in this one. There's a lot of blame to go across the back line, and giving up 2 goals in the first 12 minutes is completely unacceptable, especially against the Chicago team that, the expectations aren't high with. And, you almost look at how this game played out and wonder if the Revolution bought into the hype a little bit that it has, everyone has them kind of as a top 3 Eastern Conference team, and everybody has Chicago Fire near the bottom and thought they could just walk over them because they didn't come out of the gates with the level of energy you'd like to see from a Revolution team opening their season.
Yeah, Jake, what are your thoughts on that back four? Obviously not the best performance from that defensive line, but there were no upgrades. I mean, Christian Mafla came in and is expected to at least compete for that left back role. But other than that, really no upgrades along that starting back four. Are you concerned about that defensive line after the first game?
No, I mean, I think the back line recovered well. I think we have to give Chicago some credit. I thought the off-ball movement was pretty good for them in the first half. I thought the Chicago commentary team pointed out a couple good times where they made some pretty good runs. The second goal in particular I thought was great. I'm not exactly sure if that's supposed to be Tajon marking that guy in the middle, but certainly Tajon's just marking space at the top of the 18. He's got a free runner in the box. You'd like to see him, notice that and try and cut that off. Whether or not he gets there or not is another story. I don't think the central midfield pairing helped them in the back line relieve pressure a little bit. I don't think anyone really stood out as having a great game on the back line. I don't think Brandon Bye was terrible. I don't think Farrell was terrible. The left side had a really bad first half. That's where the 2 goals came from. The first 15 minutes was rough. Everyone sort of settled down. The Revs got back into the game. But yeah, you can't avoid you have to avoid that kind of a horrendously bad start, especially on the road. That's going to come back really to bite the Revs now. If you want to make an Open Cup qualifying run, you just blew 2 points against a team that you should be well ahead in the standings. I know it's a road point. Road points are usually not a bad thing, especially when you were down 0-2. But something about this game just isn't going to sit well at the end of the year.
No, and I think they were kind of taken by surprise by Chicago. And I was looking into Chicago a little bit last year because I spoke to a writer from Chicago doing a bit of a game preview. And one of his questions was, what concerns you the most about Chicago? And my initial response was, well, nothing. And then I kind of looked into Chicago's offense a little bit more. And they actually led the Eastern Conference in expected goals last year. And obviously they lost Mihailovic, who they traded to Montreal, but Robert Barrick is really good. And I think the Revolution may have been a little bit surprised at how hot they came out. They really kept their core from last season. So I think definitely the fans, underestimated Chicago's offense a little bit, and we saw that in the first 10 minutes. And it took that back line a little bit to adjust. And as you say, you mentioned Tajon Buchanan. Both those goals, you watch Tajon Buchanan on both of those goals, he seems a little bit lost. He clearly is not very aware on that left side and really had some struggles, and it was very, very costly. So I give them credit for the last 80 minutes of the game. They certainly improved as the game went on, and they kind of picked themselves up a little bit. But first 10 minutes, they seem to be a little bit deer in headlights-ish. So, Jake, what was your key takeaway from last night's game?
My key takeaway is usually the same key takeaway I have when I watch the Revolution struggle to hold possession of the ball. Carlos Gil needs to be in the middle of the field. Your best possessive midfielder is out on the right wing, and you wonder why you struggle to bring the ball out from the back and go forward with it. It's because your best midfielder's not in his best position. I understand that doesn't necessarily help Gustavo Bo. I know Gustavo Bo scored a goal yesterday, scored the equalizing goal. It was a very important goal. He didn't really do a whole lot outside of that as far as I noticed. There might have been some build-up play and some other things, but I don't understand why Gustavo Bo is not on the wing and why Carlos Gil is not in the middle of the field. When the Revolution are struggling to get the ball out from the back line, it's because they don't have a lot of great options in the middle of the field. Whether or not that's, Bo needs to get into better spots or Buksa needs to come up and do more hold-up play, your best midfielders playing a wide spot, which never makes any sense to me. It annoys the crap out of me every single time when the Revolution are struggling, and they struggled, pretty mightily at times in this game. First 20 minutes were especially rough. Carlos Gil's set-piece service, obviously still amazing and very helpful on the day. Obviously, when you switched Gil and Buchanan, the Revs looked 1,000 times better, more because Tajon was in a more comfortable position as well. Just a lot of little things I think the Revs didn't do great tactically. Tommy McNamara and Matt Polster, we know who they are. They're decent depth options. I think Matt Polster can be a guy who can start 20-25 games for this team and be fine. But as far as, being, dominant, game changers, that's not who either of those two are. And I don't think the combination with Bo as the acting kind of sort of cam really helped New England yesterday.
Sean, Carlos Gil obviously had a very big impact on that game. He switched to the left side after Tajon's struggles early in the first half and kind of stabilized that side of the field, and obviously seems to be kind of a stabilizer wherever he plays. He's quality wherever he is on the pitch. What are your thoughts about Jake's suggestion about playing him in the center?
I don't disagree that I like to see Carles Gil in the center, and I think he's very good there. And you like to see him in a position where he can get as many touches as humanly possible because he has the Revolution's best player and most influential player. But it goes back to a point we talked about a decent amount last season, which is what does that mean for Gustavo Bo? Because I don't really like Gustavo Bo on the wing. Gustavo Bo is still kind of that guy without a position, and I like him more in a floater role up top. If you had Gustavo Bo and DeJuan Jones on the left side, I think your defensive struggles, that was the side that Chicago was eating alive as we talked about early on. And I think if you put Gustavo Bo out on the left, that becomes even worse. So that's my concern there is that, Gustavo Bo is a great player, but I think when you have him out on the pitch, it makes it harder to put Carles Gil in his best position. And because of that, if you're going to play, him, Adam Buksa and Carles Gil, I think you're almost forced to push Carles Gil to one of the wings, unless you're, doing something where you're going to be the dominant force in the game. Maybe you're in a home game against a terrible team and you drop one of your central midfielders and have Carles Gil play as a, kind of as much of an 8 as a 10. We've seen him be able to do that before. But that's my problem with Jake's takeaways. I agree Carles Gil is great in the middle, but I think Gustavo Bou makes that very difficult to pull off outside of, certain situations when you're, playing teams that maybe you're comfortable sacrificing any defensive effort out of your left wing. And Gustavo Bou, again, is more of kind of a floater that won't necessarily stay out there and give you the width you're looking for either.
Yeah, Carles Gil, very, very strong game in his 2021 debut. Obviously, he had the assist, also 3 shots, 1 on target, 80% pass accuracy. He was also 6 for 8 on crosses, 2 for 3 on long balls, 5 key passes, and 69 touches. So obviously a really, really nice game for Carles Gil last night. My key takeaway in this one is kind of along the same veins of what you guys are talking about, but the defense needs to do a much better job of clearing the zone, getting the ball out of their own half. If they don't do that, this is going to be a very, very long season. Chicago had 9 interceptions on the Revs half of the field, according to Who Scored. And looking at some of these pass accuracies, we got some really horrific numbers here. Brandon By, 57%. DeJuan Jones, 71%. Tajon Buchanan, 67%. Andrew Farrell, 73%, which, for a center back is pretty rough. We see pass accuracies in the high 80s, 90s from these guys usually. So 73% really stood out to me. There were a few plays that seemed really uncharacteristic. Really right out of the gate, Tajon Buchanan does a back pass to DeJuan Jones, goes out of bounds. Tommy McNamara had a play where I couldn't tell what he was trying to do in the 35th minute. It looks like he's passing back, but he can't really tell, and he ends up just kind of leaving the ball out there, and it's immediately stolen and goes out for a counterattack. So this team was all over the place in terms of clearing the zone, clearing the half, and Chicago did a really, really nice job of keeping them pinned back in their zone and unable to transition from the back third to the final third. So, Jake, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, when you go and you look at the new MLS.com chalkboard area, I guess. I'm not really sure I'm a fan of the new website. You go and you look at the Revs passing matrix. It's all bunched up in the middle. Like it's literally like a straight line. All the center midfielders, Gil, Buchanan, the forwards, they're all just in the middle of the field. They're all working in the middle of the field. There was a lack of, I think, just width. There was just problems getting the ball somehow out wide as well at times. And when you have Gil who's supposed to be playing right wing, Buchanan who's supposed to be playing left wing, maybe because they switched, it looks a little bit weirder on the passing matrix. But it felt at times there was just so many problems getting the ball just up the field in possession. And if you're struggling in possession, just break out on the counterattack, which is something this team I don't think does often enough. I think the goals helped. You got back into the game, everyone settled down. It just didn't feel like there was any flow to the game, and it was mostly the Revolution's own doing.
Yeah, I agree. And you look at the players that were missing for the Revolution, and I think the center of the park certainly hurt the Revs in this one. We talked about Tommy McNamara being a good depth signing when the Revolution re-signed him. I don't think he's a guy that you want to see starting too many games. And if you look at who was out, Maciel had a great preseason. I think if he was healthy, he probably starts over Tommy McNamara. Captum, if he had more time in preseason and gotten here sooner and healthy and was ready to play, I think he might have started over Tommy McNamara. And then Luis Caicedo, if he was more fit, I think he might have started over Tommy McNamara. So you were down 2 guys that probably would have started in central midfield, and I think probably would have helped the Revolution more in possession than Tommy McNamara did. And I don't think Tommy McNamara had an awful game. I just don't think he had the impact that some of those other guys might have been capable of having in this game. And with that said, I might have started Scott Caldwell over him for this one, especially on the road. But I do think that really hurt the Revs, and I do think if one of those guys was healthy, that would have made a kind of a big difference in the Revolution's ability to kind of maintain possession and play a bit more on the front foot and less of counterattacking and falling behind early and giving the Fire some of that early momentum.
Yeah, so Sean, a lot of people were questioning the central midfielders. So you would have gone with a Scott Caldwell, Matt Polster combo. Obviously, Luis Caicedo was playing with Revs 2 yesterday. He is still building up a fitness. Maciel was out, and then Wilfred Captum came off the bench, but he was very limited in minutes. He didn't play it much in the preseason. So was your ideal central midfield, Scott Caldwell and Matt Polster in this game?
Yeah, I mean, ignoring the guys that weren't available, I think my ideal midfield is guys that weren't available. But I think I would have gone with Scott Caldwell and Matt Polster in this game, especially on the road. Scott Caldwell is a guy that, you can trust to help keep possession, to calm the game down a little bit, and, make the smart pass, if not necessarily the creative pass to create something going forward. But usually he makes a pass where the ball's not going to get turned over. Tommy McNamara wasn't terrible with 80.7% passing, but Scott Caldwell is usually among the top passers percentage-wise on the Revolution, and I think that would have helped the Revolution keep possession, help slow things down, calm it down for the Revs, and maybe would have made this game go a little bit differently in the opening minutes. But again, with that said, I think the ideal central midfield pairing involves guys that weren't available for this game.
Well, we did get a couple of questions on Twitter. Randy LH says we've got to have a better midfield pairing than Polster and T-Mac, right? Who would you like to see there next week? And Revolution Report also asked us what our starting midfield 2 is for next game. So assuming everyone is available, and Maciel, Bruce Arena confirmed afterwards that Maciel will be back this week, so we can probably expect him to be ready for this game. What do you want to see as the central midfield next week, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I assume Luis Caicedo is. I didn't see all the Revs 2 game, but from what it sounds like, he didn't have a great game. I don't think we're going to be seeing him next week in the starting lineup. Maciel got a ton of minutes in preseason and a lot of starting minutes, and if he's fit, I think we might see him next week. I don't know that Captum, after playing 8 minutes in this game, is going to be ready to start. I think long-term you'd like to see him start, but my kind of guess going into the next game is that we might see Maciel and Matt Polster start. Now, I don't think that's the Revolution's best long-term central midfield pairing. I'm just kind of projecting based on, minutes guys have gotten so far in fitness. Long-term, I think the Revolution expect Captum to start. I just don't know that next week he's going to be ready for that. And it would certainly be something if, Captum and Maciel ended up being the Revs starting central midfielders, but that's something I could see. I could also see Luis Caicedo getting back into form and being one of those starting midfielders because he was a really good player for the Revolution 2 years ago. Next week, my guess is Matt Polster and Maciel. And again, based on what I'm projecting fitness-wise.
And Bruce didn't say Maciel was starting, but he more or less implied it. He said last night in the post-game press conference that Maciel was very much missed, and he's very good under pressure and is able to possess the ball very, very well. So it seems like Maciel has worked his way up on Bruce's depth chart, and we might be seeing him next week. Jake, any disagreement with Sean on what we can expect next week and what you want next week for the central midfield pairing?
No, I think, Maciel might have helped. Again, that's a very, solid skill set and a player who is, in form and appears to be highly regarded. I think for me, it's more of figuring out, when I look at, Tommy Mac and Polster, who is the number 8 and who is the number 6? Who's going to be, staying back in front of the defense? Who's going to be going forward? Normally I would say, maybe Polster's more the number 6, and in that situation, maybe Tommy Mac's the number 8. And I didn't see that balance from those two. If you are playing a 4-2-3-1, you usually have one guy who's going to sit back a little bit more. That would have probably been Scott Caldwell, letting Matt Polster get forward. That would have been a much more clearly defined thing. I don't know if T-Mac and Polster ever defined their roles, if they were both box to box, if it was more of a 4-4-2 flat kind of formation. It just seemed a little weird yesterday. Maybe it was Maciel was expecting to start, and him not making the trip maybe threw the Revs off a little bit because they had been working on things with expecting maybe him to start. So, I'd expect Maciel to start, and if he can take over kind of more of that, number 8, more rangy box-to-box possessive midfielder type, that would definitely help. I think that's what was missing for the Revs in the midfield, particularly in the middle of the field, just be able to just possess the ball, maneuver the ball, go forward. One of the things the Revolution did well in the playoffs last year was you had guys like, Buchanan and Teal Bunbury and Carlos Hill on the ball moving forward in space. And they didn't have those opportunities, whether that was tactical or Chicago doing things well or other things, just never seemed to get the flow to this game. And I don't think the lineup and some of the tactical decisions helped New England. And the adjustments, switching, Hill and Buchanan, those things help, but not after you're down 0-2.
Yeah, although I will say I think that switching Buchanan and Hill certainly changed the game.
Yes.
I think Tajon was really confused and just really, I don't know if he didn't train that much on the left side or what, but that Hill needed to stabilize that left side because Chicago seemed like they were going to be running down that left wing all day. They were able to pull DeJuan Jones up and really work the overlapping runs a number of times on Tajon. And it just didn't seem like there was a whole lot of cohesion on that side of the field. And getting back to your point, too, about how the McNamara and Polster pairing seemed confused, didn't seem to really define their roles. I think that's a great point, and I think it's worth noting that these aren't two new players that haven't had experience playing with each other. They played a lot last year, too. They've been with this team since midway through last season, so not really what you expect from two veteran midfielders, especially veteran midfielders that have played with the team for almost a year. So
well, that you bring up a great point there, though, because you look at the Revolution starting lineup in this game, and they made a lot of offseason acquisitions. None of them started this game. This was a Revolution team that should have been very familiar with each other, and those first 12 minutes certainly didn't seem like that was the case. But no, that's a key point to make is none of these new guys started this game. This was last year's team with a lot of familiarity.
Yeah, we can say Kessler was gone or whatever, but really the first 10 minutes were unacceptable on all levels. I don't think anyone's really disputing that, including Bruce Arena and the Revolution players. So I do want to get Jake's thoughts on this DeJuan Jones red card. For those that did not see it, DeJuan Jones is chasing after a player. I don't remember who it is. DeJuan Jones gives him a bit of a nudge from behind. He goes down right outside of the box and is immediately red carded. It goes to VAR. But it seems like VAR was reviewing whether or not the foul was in the box, because the referee, I guess, originally awarded a penalty kick, and then before went to VAR, said, no, it's outside the box, and then went to VAR and confirmed it was outside the box, but apparently did not review the red card. So, Jake, take it away. What are your thoughts on what occurred last night?
Oh, God. Where do we start? All right, first of all, Fotis Bazakis is about 30 yards behind this play and points immediately to the spot. I have no idea how he comes to this termination. I don't know his assistant is ever included in the decision, but his assistant, I think, would have been able to at least say, hey, we should, talk about this first. I think what happened was that Buchanan obviously makes contact. I believe it was with, I can't pronounce his first name, but Frankowski, the right winger for Chicago, makes contact with him outside of the box. They continue tussling. They go down inside the box. Okay, we point to the spot. Not the end of the world. VAR is going to confirm it, or disconfirm it. Where the red card comes from, I have no idea. The Chicago announcers had no idea it had even been produced. It was such an odd thing. It's not a denial of a goal scoring opportunity. Frankowski's not in on goal one-on-one. He's not even. That doesn't even count Andrew Farrell's position. He's not even one-on-one with the goalkeeper. He's at the top corner of the box. He's not even in on goal or has an angle on goal. It's not a last man situation. It's not an excessive force situation. And I don't know how VAR doesn't review that. It's one thing to review whether or not the penalty was inside or outside the box. How you don't, in the same process, review or confirm the red card is beyond me. These are two decisions that should have taken about 15 seconds, maybe each, to figure out. And instead, as Bazakos is chalking off the free kick for outside the area, now we somehow have to go to the monitor. This is about as EPL level of bad from a VAR crew in MLS as I think you're going to see this year. The VAR crews in England have a very ass-backwards way of doing things, as we see on a almost weekly basis. Looking at you, Arsenal, from about, I think, 2 hours ago. I saw that on Twitter. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what happened with all of this. I expect the Revolution to appeal this. I expect them to win. And if needed, DeJuan Jones should be available at left back next week.
You think this is a complete overturn? I mean, we did get a question from Cleggy on Discord who says that, do you think there'll be an appeal? You think this is easily going to be overturned? There's no argument for this being a red card?
I will never say never with the disco, because the MLS Disciplinary Committee is what they are, and they are not known for what I consider to be consistently good at their job or interpretations and things like that. I would put it at about 90%. That's about as confident as I can be, that if this is a red card situation for denial of a goal scoring opportunity for a foul in that position, then you're going to see a lot of games in MLS this year, in theory, if we call everything consistently, end about 9v9 if that's a red card. And since I don't believe that to be the case, I expect this one to be very, very easy. I would also expect someone from Professional Referee Organization, to do a video on how the hell you can screw this up from a VAR standpoint. This went to review for both the penalty call being inside or outside the box, and I would hope, in theory, to confirm the red card, and somehow we missed the second half of that process, or at least according to the VAR Twitter account for MLS, they only reviewed the penalty. They didn't review the red card. So I have a lot of questions about what went down. How you fix it is just additional communication. Fotis Bazakos, center referee, needs to communicate with his AR. Not sure that happened. He certainly didn't go over and talk to him. Whether or not there was communication over the headsets, we don't have access to that. I think we should have access to that during the review process. It's very helpful. You can learn a lot from having access to that type of communication during the broadcast. The A-League does it in Australia. I'm a big cricket fan now. When cricket's doing their reviews, you have, the umpire literally talking out the entire process as it's going out. It's tremendously helpful in learning and how the decisions and everything works and plays out. And I would have loved to have had a bird's eye view or the fly on the wall for that conversation as to how the only thing that was talked about was whether or not the foul was inside or outside the box and whether or not that was a last man situation, because never in a million years should a red card or even a yellow card for that matter have been pulled in that spot. That's a common foul and nothing more. There is never a chance that should have ever been a denial of a goal scoring opportunity, and how that even came about is beyond me at this point. It doesn't make any sense.
You wouldn't give a yellow though. I mean, it seemed like a professional foul. I mean, DeJuan Jones is really not in a spot to play the ball and does make contact, to be fair. We can say it's not a breakaway, but Chicago is leading a charge back the other way late in the game. You don't think I would assume that it was at least a yellow.
I wouldn't have been upset if a yellow card had been produced, but it didn't seem to me. Normally a tactical foul is a lot more cynical. Yes, DeJuan Jones is more playing the man than playing the ball, but he's also, he's trying to gain position. It's not, to me, an obvious, I'm taking out the man to stop, an obvious breakaway. It's trying, get in better position and get the ball away from this guy. That's what I felt it was. DeJuan Jones, as they carried themselves into the box, was right there with Frankowski. It's not one of those where he's pulling it back and it's 2 or 3 yards behind the play. I think it's much closer to a common foul than it is a yellow card. If a yellow card got issued, am I upset? No, I'm not upset. It is what it is. But I don't even think that a card would have been worthy in that game, particularly the way that game was called by Bazakos, with only one card being pulled out. I think it was the 79th minute.
Yeah.
Was the first card in that game. So there's a lot of issues we had with Mr. Bazakos prior to the 90th minute red card decision, as far as disciplining cards and things like that. But I think, maybe perhaps some of the reason why he thinks that's a red card is because he wasn't pulling out enough yellow cards prior to that. And that situation seemed much more serious than some other things, which it wasn't. So a lot of just not great yesterday.
Yeah, I was going to tack on that. No cards until the 79th minute. And even that yellow, I think you can make an argument that should have been a red as opposed to the DeJuan Jones play. That was a pretty sloppy tackle at midfield too. So the referee let them play. It was obviously a very, very physical game. He did not do a very good job controlling the game whatsoever. So I think you're right that throwing out a red late in the game was very inconsistent with the previous 90 minutes of that match. We did get another question from Cleggy on Discord who says, if the appeal is upheld, who starts at left back for DeJuan Jones? Sean, I'll go to you. Who do you see starting at left back? Even if this is overturned, I think there's a good argument to be made DeJuan Jones should not be starting at left back next week. But assuming that he is suspended, who do you think is starting at left back next week, Sean?
I mean, you hope Mafla's ready and that you throw him right into the fire and give him a chance, whether or not DeJuan Jones is available. If Mafla's not ready, then maybe you're forced to give AJ De La Garza a shot at left back in this one. I'm not sure you have many other options. I guess you could put Brandon By at left back. I do wonder if that would work. I kind of go back many years to Kevin Alston, who got switched over to left back at some points later in his time with the Revolution, and actually to me looked better as a left back than a right back because it kind of forced him to simplify his game, knowing that he wasn't going to get forward and be able to use his right foot to cross. I do wonder if that might help Brandon By a little bit if he push to left back and was kind of forced to simplify his game in the same way, and then you put Tajon Buchanan at right back. There's a lot of options, none of which are particularly great if Mafla's not available. But my expectation is that Mafla, with another week of training after getting some minutes with Revs 2, goes out there even if he's not quite ready for 90 minutes and gets to start, maybe regardless of whether or not DeJuan Jones is available.
Jay Cruz starting to left back next week.
I mean, if all options are equal, I would go with Brandon Bai on the left and Tajon Buchanan on the right. Not to start going into we should start Tajon Buchanan at fullback argument, but I think we should start Tajon Buchanan at fullback argument. Would I be upset if AJ De La Garza started left back? No, I wouldn't. That's why AJ De La Garza is here. He's the utility defender. You can put him anywhere in that back line, and I'd be perfectly happy with him as a spot start. No, DeJuan Jones wasn't good. I don't think that this game or that phantom call is what I'm going to call it for right now until the disco sorts it out. I don't think that cost DeJuan Jones his job. If Christian Mafla's available and is just better, then that's his starting spot. But DeJuan Jones is going to get minutes this year. He's going to get starts. Bruce Arena has arguably one of the deepest rosters in the league. He needs to use more of his substitutions before the 80th minute, but that's a separate thing, and we might talk about. But no, DeJuan Jones, if he's unavailable, I think the Revs have plenty of options that will be equally suitable.
Well, actually, let get into that a little bit in terms of the substitutions, because 2 subs made in the 82nd minute. One of them was Adam Buksa. Sean, out of curiosity, what were your thoughts on the substitutions by Bruce last night? Obviously, he's playing with a limited bench, and I think that is more of a reflection of that. But what were your thoughts on Bruce's substitutions patterns yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that you can still make 5 subs in MLS, and I think Chicago made 2 and the Revs made 3. I'm not sure they necessarily need to make 5 in this game, but I'm on the side of Jake that we've seen this before, that Bruce Arena waited too late to make some of the subs. Again, it's your first game of the season. Yes, there was preseason, but I'm sure a lot of these guys aren't quite 90 minutes fit yet. So it was surprising that you wait that long to make a sub. And yes, the bench was kind of thin, but you got a guy like Emmanuel Boateng, who we know has got tons and tons of pace. And I don't know why you don't use him in a game like this. Even if you're going to bring him on at the 75th minute to kind of run at guys and cause the defense a lot of problems. I also, I know Buksa was probably getting tired, but Buksa had a pretty good game. So it's a little bit weird to me that if you're trying to win this game, that you sub out, one of your best goal scoring threats, your DP for Edward Kiza, who, almost scored a goal himself, we should say. It came very close. But no, the substitution pattern for me was most surprising, that they waited so long to make subs. You have 5 subs. You could bring Scott Caldwell on in the 60th minute to have some fresh legs in central midfield. I don't think Tommy McNamara was doing anything too great. There's a lot of different ways you could have gone with this. Given the extra subs you're allowed to make right now, and waiting until the 82nd minute to make your second and third subs, didn't make a whole lot of sense for me in your first game of the season when guys are not going to be 90 minutes match fit because they haven't been playing much.
Jake, anything to add on the subs?
Just this is something that we've been talking about this with Bruce for, I want to say, almost all of last year as well. You have the extra subs. Use them earlier. Scott Caldwell would have been helpful in this game for the final, I think, 20 minutes. If you want to bring Edward Kiza on, that's fine. I have no problem with that. I guess it makes sense to bring him on for Buksa because he's going to be playing the out-and-out number 9 position. I would have very easily subbed off Gustavo Bo and brought in definitely, Boateng. For sure on one of the wing spots. Again, I'm biased because I want to move Carlos Hill into the middle of the field because I always want to do that. But yeah, there were options. Revolution certainly could have pressed a lot more in the final 20 minutes. And credit to Edward Kiza. That was, I don't think, a very easy header. I know the expected goal thing for that was fairly high, but that he seemed a little off balance. To get that even on frame was pretty darn impressive. And I was, for a very, very short amount of time he was on the field, that was a very impressive debut and nearly a spectacular winner for the rookie.
Yes, it's hard to fault him too much for hitting the post there or the crossbar there. It was a really good effort from him, and what a debut that would have been if had it gone the other side of the crossbar.
Yeah, I think he's already exceeding expectations as the 24th overall pick from the Super Draft, and he's the first 24th overall draft pick in the last 5 years to make an appearance in MLS. So it looks like Bruce has gotten a bit of a steal. And as I noted last night on Twitter, the last time we had a player that headed the ball off of the post in the season opener. He had European interest by the end of the year, so future's very bright for Edward Kizza if history holds. Moving on to Tajon, though.
It's a good tweet. I think I like that one.
Thank you, Jake. I always appreciate it. I do want to talk about Tajon, though, really, really quickly, because, Jake, I actually agree with your suggestion. Maybe we play Tajon Buchanan at right back. We play Brandon By at left back. I think we could use another attacking element now that we're at home. We're playing a DC United team that I would expect 3 points from, hopefully, knock on wood. But Tajon Buchanan as an attacking right back, this might be a good matchup for him next week. But what are your thoughts about him playing as a left winger? We got a question from TSB who says, how much do you think Tajon's defensive lapses will factor into Bruce's left wing choices over the next couple of weeks? He was 100% at fault in the first goal, and it could be argued that his slow reaction was the cause of the second, which I agree with. Sean, I'll go to you on this one. Do you think Tajon Buchanan is done on the left side, at least for the near future?
I mean, he looked really uncomfortable there. There's no denying that he didn't, on the defensive end especially, but even on the offensive end, he looked really uncomfortable playing that left wing role. With that said, I don't think we're never going to see him again. I think he's just a tremendously talented player with a lot of pace that works well on the wings. And, he may be more comfortable on the right wing right now, but he's only 22 years old. He hasn't had that much time on the left wing. This game was a poor performance from him on the left, but I do think that going forward, we will see other times in which he, gets opportunities on the left wing. Maybe next week won't be one of them. Maybe he needs some more practice there, or maybe Bruce Arena needs to give somebody else a chance at that spot. But I don't think this is the last time we ever see him there, despite the fact that it wasn't a good showing from him. He's got too much talent and too much pace. And his skill set just makes too much sense as a winger, for given, kind of the options the Revolution have when they're trying to figure out their best lineup, him not to see some minutes on the left wing. Again, I think he's a better right winger, and I think he's going to be a better right winger going forward, but I don't think this is the last we've seen of him on the left.
Jake, anything to add on that?
No, I mean, one of the reasons why, Tajon Buchanan did have, a breakout playoffs and Olympic qualifying campaign and everything else was he was at right back for the Revs in the playoffs. And what that did is that allowed him a lot of times overlapping with Carlos Seal, a ton of space moving forward. Why? Because people don't know whether to step up on Tajon, step up on Carlos Seal, or just sit back and do nothing, which is a lot of times what happened. Obviously you're going to have Arnor Traustausen, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Traustausen, at the left wing spot. That's what we expect him to be in the left wing spot. So that means you're really only going to be using either Tajon off the bench as a sub and that winger role, or you're going to play him at right back. I would like to see Tajon at right back. I understand Bruce wants him to be a winger. I understand Tajon wants to be a winger. Right now, he helps the Revolution the most from the right back spot. Brandon By and DeJuan Jones are fine, capable, mostly two-way fullbacks at this point in their careers. Tajon Buchanan can be a game-changing attacking fullback who really, really helps the Revolution and helps Carlos Hill, particularly if he's going to play on the right wing, which I dislike, but I can't fix that issue. I would prefer, if Carlos Hill is going to be on the right-hand side of the field as a winger, cutting in, he needs someone overlapping who's just as dangerous, and that option is Tajon Buchanan. It's not even a question. Brandon By is good. He's not potentially great, which Tajon Buchanan is from that role going forward. The interest that the rumors are, well, hey, people, PSV and a few others are looking at him as a right back, Mr. Buchanan, not as a winger. That doesn't mean he can't play winger for Canada if he breaks through to the Canadian national team. But professionally right now, he's much more dangerous as a right back than he is as a winger. And that's because he has more space in front of him. I think he understands the role defensively a lot more from right back than he does at winger. Winger, particularly in a 4-2-3-1, is a very odd position sometimes. You're following different players a lot when you're tracking back. Sometimes you're tracking a fullback. Sometimes you're tracking a holding midfielder. Sometimes you're tracking a forward. Maybe you've gotten someone who's trailing in back behind, and that leads to Stojanovic's the second goal, where someone comes in from the second line, and you've got to pick him up. And if you react and you miss that, someone's got a free shot and goal 8 yards from the box, and Matt Turner's unhappy, which he was the first 15 minutes of this game.
Absolutely. I do want to touch on one more person before we move on to some other listener questions, but Adam Buksa had a pretty solid game all the way around. Actually, both designated players. I know we talked about Bo coming off. Bo wasn't as involved in this game, but he also got on the score sheet as well. Both designated players coming up big in this game. Adam Buksa's performance, Sean, do you think Adam Buksa was the man of the match in this game? And James Downing also asks, has Buksa finally found his footing in MLS?
Yeah, really quickly, we all went with kind of negative takeaways from this one, but the positive takeaway was that the two of the designated players scored, which is it's huge for the Revolution in their first game of the season. Both of those guys are guys that confidence plays a big role. Any striker confidence plays a big role. So to see Bo and Buksa both got on the score sheet was huge and a very big positive for the Revolution. I think we have seen Buksa kind of find his footing in MLS. We saw it a little bit towards the end of last season. He looked more comfortable in this game. I want to see him do it for a longer stretch of time before I'm ready to say, he's become that player the Revolution expected him to be. But this was certainly a very good sign. And, we've seen the trends for him head in the right direction after what was kind of a disappointing start to his Revolution career. So a lot to be positive about, but I would want to wait, a few more games and see him do it, for maybe a 4 or 5 game stretch at the start of the season for the Revolution where he looks really comfortable and dangerous on chances before I'm ready to say he's gone over that hump.
Jake, anything to add on Adam Buksa? Do you think he's found his footing in MLS? And James also asks, can we expect big things from him this year? We kind of went on the record last week with our over-under goals prediction on Adam Buksa. Are you expecting big things out of Adam this year?
Yes, I think Adam's expecting big things. As our own Ben Musket man, editor Sam Minton asked him, yesterday, hey, you were struggling at times last season. He says, no, I don't like the word that I was struggling. I don't agree with that. And I think he's right. I don't think he struggled at all last year. I think the Revolution struggled to get him involved and stranded him at the top of the field last year a lot. I think Adam Buksa is perfectly fine. What we're going to see now is that when he gets service, particularly set-piece service from Carlos Heel, you're going to see how much more dangerous this team is when you can get him fully involved. I think finding the balance, not only in the midfield for the Revolution, which felt off today or yesterday, but finding the balance between Buksa and Bo and what their roles are and how they can play off each other. It seems like, you have two forwards, but they're all operating separately from one another, and that needs to change. Getting Buksa more involved, whether it's letting him hold up play, spraying the ball out wide, using him as a traditional number 9, however it is the Revolution are going to make it work. Game to game is fine, but overall, throughout the course of the season, if you get Adam Buksa involved, this team is going to be better. They're going to score more goals. They're going to have more chances. They're going to have more second chances, either for him to clean up or someone else to clean up in the box. And you're going to see the impact Buksa can have with the Revs fully operational, which they were not last year. The Revs were a bit of a mess. Obviously, Heel was out, but it was more than that. There was a lot of other things that were going wrong. And it ends up with people wondering, God, why is Adam Buksa not producing? He's not producing because you're not getting him the ball. Those are two separate problems. And I think we're starting to realize that when you get Buksa the ball, he's pretty darn good at what he does.
Yeah, Adam Buksa's night in total, obviously, he had the goal in the 13th minute, which changed the game completely. He was also 4 shots, 2 of them on target, 72% pass success rating. He had 1 key pass, 46 touches. One stat that I want to point out that I think really shows how he was all over the place, winning balls all over the place. He was 14 for 21 on duels, and also he was he won 8 of 12 aerials. So he was a real big force in the air last night. I think he deserves some man of the match credit. And, Kiza obviously came on to impress, but I thought it was a bit strange seeing Buksa come out after the game he had yesterday. One more thing I want to touch on, actually, before we move on is, obviously, this is not a result I think a lot of Revs fans were expecting. But I think it's fair to say that the result was fair. It was a level game. Is there any change in expectations for you guys for the rest of the season now that we have seen the Revolution and how they measure up against a team like Chicago? Jake, I'll go to you first.
No, I mean, I would still expect, this team, again, when fully healthy, which we can argue right now we're not, when fully healthy, this should be a team that can compete for the top 3 in the East. I understand things might happen, but I mean, certainly we think this is a playoff team. The question from last year is how much can we build on the playoff run? how much does that playoff run take us? Because remember, we were a mediocre regular season team because it took us a while to get going. Starting from mostly full strength, is this a team that can, compete for the Shield, compete for the top 3, play most of their playoff games in November at home, as opposed to being on the road almost the entire time? That's the step that you expect this team to make this year, with Carlos Seal healthy, with Gustavo Bo on the field all the time, with Adam Buksa operating with the support needed around him, with Matt Turner saving pretty much everything. Now you want to see how much of a big step can this team take in making another, MLS Cup run. No one's going to be surprised by them this year. They're expected to be a favorite. They're expected to be in the top 3. You're going to get a lot of teams better shots. Obviously, Chicago at home, you go down 0-2. Getting a point is pretty darn good in most circumstances. That's probably a game a handful of years ago we probably lose by giving up more goals. So yeah, I don't think the expectations change. I think it just, now, you make it a little harder on yourself. If you were expecting this to be a win, it's not. So that's 2 points now you've got to make up at some point, particularly maybe against Atlanta in 2 weeks at home, especially if you want to make a U.S. Open Cup run. I don't think, 5 points, maybe a win against DC and a draw against Atlanta, I don't think 5 points gets you into the top 8 for the Open Cup qualifying if it occurs this year. So you've got to make up points in that as well. So little things like that, dropping points in April, does not, necessarily, cost you a shot at a title, but it does make things harder on yourself.
Yeah, and just to add on that, it was announced that the U.S. Open Cup is postponed or canceled. It's unclear if there's going to be a 2021 U.S. Open Cup, but for now, they've at least delayed it potentially for later in the season, so we're not really sure what the qualification metrics are. It might be the same, but it might not be. So that's just one little quick note. But overall, your point here is that these are 2 points dropped, and I don't think a whole lot of people are happy with it. Although once you fall down 2-0, I think a lot of people were happy with the point and getting out of Chicago with the point.
Yeah,
Sean.
Just one quick thing on the Open Cup. This is a blatant attempt to prevent the Newtown, Connecticut Pride from winning it all. I think U.S. Soccer is afraid that the national amateur champions of 2019 are going to win the whole thing, and I think they should be afraid.
It's a conspiracy against Connecticut.
Always is.
Jake, do you think that the Revs changing their TV contract from NBCSN to CBS, do you think that was also a conspiracy against Connecticut? Because now you're an ESPN Plus fan like me.
It's not a conspiracy against Connecticut. It's not a conspiracy against Connecticut. I don't know the over-the-air contracts and specifics for Boston. I'm a little bit withdrawn from my broadcasting major career in college. It was a while ago. I will say that in the year 2021, where we have access to stream anything from just about anywhere in the country, I don't know why broadcasting rules and blackouts still exist. So I'm not going to say that it isn't a conspiracy against Connecticut, but it does seem to be some kind of a conspiracy that is not just a disaster for Connecticut, but a disaster for apparently the rest of New England as well, if you're not in the greater Boston area. I think a lot of people were complaining about, I think Maine in particular was complaining, how the heck do we watch games if they're not online? Because some people might still be in New England and blacked out as well. So a little bit of some issues here we need to sort out, whether that's MLS or federal regulation, whoever it is. It's 2021, guys. We shouldn't have problems right now with this stuff. It's a national contract. We should be able to watch games whenever the heck we want. If you're paying for ESPN Plus or MLS Live or whatever, can we just watch games, please? I just want to watch games. Can we do that?
RIP MLS Live, by the way.
I miss MLS. I miss even the old website. The new website stinks. I'm going to say it.
It is noteworthy that the Revolution do have a pregame show on CBS now, so we appreciate Connecticut's sacrifice so the Revs could get a. Oh, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm not in Boston either. But Sean, reel into the name here, Sean. Do you have any changed expectations for this season?
No, I mean you got to look at this too as, the Revolution were a really good road team last year. They got most of their points on the road. That's extremely unusual. A road draw generally isn't a bad result, even against the Chicago Fire team that, the expectations aren't high on. So, if you look at it in that perspective, it was the first game of the season. They're not going to be as sharp as they're going to be, 5-6 games from now. coming away with a point on the road is not the end of the world. The Revolution need to get most of their points at home this season. They need to create a home field advantage that didn't exist last year. I don't know if having 8,000 fans in the stands is going to make much of a difference there. Maybe it will. But that's what we need to see from them this year. We need to see them come home and get 3 points, and we need to see them do that regularly. If you draw all your road games and win all your home games, you're in great shape. Last year it was, winning a lot of road games and doing crap at home. So, a road tie doesn't change things for me. Going into this season, and I think I talked about it on some previous podcasts, left back was a little bit of a concern for me because, Christian Mafla has that reputation for being injury prone coming into the Revolution. And, DeJuan Jones has done a good job there overall. But we saw a lot of weakness from him in that role this game. I don't know if that's a fluke or if, maybe what we were seeing last year, we were kind of overrating him because of, how he stepped up and also, the contributions of, Teal Bunbury to help him defend and whoever else was playing over there. I don't know that yet. But my concern for left back existed before this game and it exists slightly greater after this game. But other than that, my expectations for the Revolution have remained the same. I think this is going to be a very good team in the East. They had a very bad start to their season. Those first 12 minutes were horrendous, but they showed fight back to come back. That shows that's great for it shows a great strength of character for them that they came back and fought and tied this game. And at the end of the season, I don't think you look back at a tie on the road as a defining point in a negative manner of the year. So, if they're a team again this year that struggles tremendously at home and has to get most of their points on the road, they're going to be a lot more problems than just this one draw that lead to them not meeting expectations.
Yeah, and one other thing too is, obviously they fell behind early, but it's nice to see some fight back and respond very, very quickly. And if you look at the numbers here, chances created 19-14 Chicago, expected goals Chicago had 2.24, New England at 1.87. So those kind of numbers imply that Chicago was probably on the front foot, and it's a fair result overall. But there were a number of plays in this game that if it goes a little bit differently, the Revolution score another 1 or 2 goals. Adam Buksa had a header over the bar in the first half that he wanted back. That could have been goal number 3. Obviously, the Edward Kizza header off of the crossbar. There was a play where DeJuan Jones made a nice move into the box, got around a defender, was kind of one-on-one with Shuttleworth, tried laying it off for Gustavo Bo, who would have finished it, but a defender stuck a leg out and just barely made enough contact to clear the ball. Adam Buksa had a play where he has the ball in the box and Tajon Buchanan is running around him, and the defender kind of cheats over towards Tajon. Buksa cuts in and has a clear shot at goal, but I think Jonathan Bornstein comes in from behind at last second and touches it out for a corner kick. Carlos Heel had a shot from the top of the box that went just barely wide. So, we can look at these numbers and say, overall it's a fair result, but this team had a ton of chances. It seemed like offensively they were clicking on all cylinders. And if the last 80 plus minutes of the game, the Revolution were the better team in my opinion. So I agree with you guys. I'm not changing any expectations. I still think they're going to compete for a top spot in the East. So let's move on to some listener questions before we wrap up here today. Quite Rev says, who starts the next game that didn't start this one? We have already talked about Maciel. I think we're both expecting Maciel to start next game. And obviously we talked about the left back kind of rotation. There's a number of things they could do there, excluding left back where, Sean, you're expecting Mafla. Jake, I think we're expecting Brandon Bye to shift over for Tajon Buchanan to play right back. Do you expect any changes in this lineup whatsoever? Sean, I'll start with you.
Yeah, the only other one that might happen, and I to be honest, don't have a good sense of where he's at or how ready he is Traustason coming in at the left wing role. Really, other than the Maciel in the left back spot, that's the only other change I could see happening. But I'm not sure that another week is going to have him ready to start. So I think we're going to see, other than those two moves, pretty close to the same lineup as last year. With that, as last game, maybe with that one exception, if he's more ready than we're aware of to step right in.
Jake, any changes you're making other than potentially Traustason?
No, if Straussson isn't ready, if you're going to go with maybe Brandon Bye on the left back, and if it's not Straussson, I have no problem with Teal Bunbury going on the left back and just letting him be Teal Bunbury and giving the support defensively to Brandon Bye or whoever on the left back side. That also might help New England just getting guys like Teal and Boateng on the field earlier or at all. It greatly beneficial to the Revs late in games because those guys just have such high energy and high motor. They're just everywhere, and I think that's something the Revolution, it needed more fresh legs. So I would expect maybe a little bit of rotation against a DC team that was also very surprisingly spunky against I think it was New York City FC in a 2-1 win. So that was it's going to be a very, very interesting match for the Revs home opener next week.
Yeah, and I would like to see Boateng too, but to me, the fact that he didn't get any minutes in the first game implies that the best we can hope for in the second game is a substitute appearance. But curious to see what happens there.
Quite Revs also asks us who were we most disappointed in and most impressed by. I'm going to say that probably my most disappointed performance goes to Tajon Buchanan. I know left wing is a little bit new to him, but I think that's an experiment that I'm not really looking forward to again if we see it ever again. And in terms of most impressed by, I think Adam Buksa played very, very well. I think we've been hyping him up all off season with the addition of Carlisle back to the lineup. I think we're going to see a rejuvenated Adam Buksa, who, by the way, has 5 goals in his last 11 games. I don't know if I threw out that stat earlier, but he's really caught on to form, and that includes playoffs, by the way, recently. So we'll go around the horn real quick. Jake, who are you most disappointed in, and who are you most impressed by?
Oh God, I mean, I think everything about the first 12 to 15 minutes I was disappointed in. I don't think there was anything that was good. Team-wise, individual-wise, everything was bad, and then Adam Buksa scored a goal, and everything changed. So I'm going to agree with. I think I'm going to agree with you, Ray. It's just I think Adam Buksa definitely was the player of the match for me. He was everywhere. He's the only player on the field that I would argue besides Carlos Hill was like, yes, he was good the entire time. Everyone else had a problem at some point, particularly in the first 15 minutes, particularly in the first half, which was sloppy. I don't think I'm disappointed by any one individual. I think I'm disappointed by kind of sort of the collective hive mind of badness that was the opening to that game.
Yeah, I would echo everything both of you just said. With the Adam Buksa was the most impressive, and I think you could pick one of 3 players as the least impressive, and that would be Buchanan, Jones, and Kessler. And part of that is because the expectations are so high for Tajon Buchanan after the season he had. They're so high for Henry Kessler after the season he had, and both of those guys also playing in Olympic qualifying, and Buchanan looking great, Kessler looking decent. There was a lot of expectations for both those players, and DeJuan Jones had been a very solid left back for the Revolution last year, and all 3 of them did not live up to expectations in the first game. So any of those 3, I think, are good candidates for most disappointed. But I can't disagree with Buksa for most impressed because, expectations are hard to set for Buksa because he did start last year poorly, and there were times last year where he didn't look great. He came on good at the end of last year, but I didn't know whether or not that would carry over and where that would go. And so far, so good for him. So most impressed by him. But agree with everything both of you said.
And one more question from Quite Revs. Was last night the result of Chicago playing well or the Revolution playing bad? Sean, what are your thoughts on that?
Both. I think Chicago played a little bit better than I expected them to. And I think the Revolution, especially at the beginning, were a little bit worse than I expected them to be. Again, we've seen Revolution over the years start games slowly. Sometimes under Bruce Arena that happened too. So they started this game extremely slowly, and that was disappointing. And I think there was expectations that, again, given the momentum they were hopefully carrying over from last season, they would have gotten off to a better start. But I think it's a combination. Like you said earlier, expectations for Chicago are very low, and they certainly exceeded them by starting this game strongly and ending up with a draw.
Yeah, anything to add on? Oh, good.
No, the answer to the question is yes. I mean, you have to give Chicago credit. I think their movement in the first half, particularly the first 20 minutes, was incredibly effective. The Revolution backline, yes, it was a mess, but it's also a mess because the Fire were very good at pulling everyone out of position, and you had free runners all over the place. And you have to give them credit for that. I think the only goal in this game that someone's going to collectively want back that probably wasn't deserved was Bo's equalizer. I think that was a bad goal for Chicago to give up. It came from nothing. It came from a throw-in. The Chicago announcers were incensed. Like, how are we giving up chances off throw-ins? What's going on here? That's I think the one goal where everyone's like, what? Collectively, that was the worst goal given up by anyone. We can give a lot of credit. Obviously, Buksa gets a wonderful header, puts into the side netting. The 2 goals for Chicago are, zone 14, right in the center, slotting home into mostly empty nets. Nothing really Matt Turner can do about those unless he pulls miracles, which he can't do every time. I know we love him and we expect great things, but even he can't save things point blank from 8 yards out. But no, you absolutely have to give Chicago a ton of credit. That was a brilliant start for them, and equally you have to give the Revs credit for clawing back as quickly as they did to make that second half a very cagey, a little bit more cautious affair. For I think a well-earned point all around for both teams.
Yeah, I think similar to the way that the Revolution last year were better than an 8 seed where they ended up. Chicago was better than an 11th seed or whatever they were last year, and you have to give them a lot of credit for how they played, and I obviously, I think it's a fair result, but I don't know. I outside of those first 10 minutes, which we've talked about, which were absolutely horrid, I don't think the Revs played all that bad yesterday. I think it's just a Chicago team that a lot of people underestimated going into this one. So,
and one of our friends, Patrick McCraney from Hot Time in Old Town, who I talked to before the game, he said Chicago usually plays really well for about 85 minutes, and then there's a 5-minute stretch where they shoot themselves in the foot. Well, the 5-minute stretch where they shot themselves in the foot was that Buchanan and Bo combination off the throw-in. Everything else they did yesterday was pretty darn solid. And that's, I think you're right. I think it's a Chicago team that should be better than 11th place and can compete for a playoff spot. I just think they're so inconsistent. We don't know how to gauge them properly over the course of a regular season yet.
I just want to point out one thing about that Chicago team, because you talk about the Revolution and bringing depth off the bench and the options there. If you look at the ages of the players on the Chicago bench, it's amazing. And I don't think necessarily a good thing for them this season, but long term, it's pretty exciting. I'm just quickly looking at their bench. There's a 17-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 19-year-old, a 17-year-old, a 22-year-old, a 21-year-old, a 23-year-old, and then another 22-year-old, and then the oldest guy on the bench was 25. So this is a Chicago team that I think a few years down the road, even their starting lineup had several young guys. If you ignore 36-year-old Jonathan Bornstein, who's somehow still in the league, I think this is a Chicago Fire team that may not get there this season, but has so much young talent, even young talent that they're confident enough to put on the game day 18, that they're going to be a scary team to watch, or game day 20 now, I should say. They're going to be a scary team to watch going forward, if not this year, then a few years down the road.
Yeah, and they didn't make many additions in this offseason, which kind of tells me that Raphael Wicki is doing a long, slow build, a long, slow rebuild. But this team, as it is right now, I don't think is anything to sleep on, and we learned that last night. So I'm not sure when we see them again, but when they come to Foxborough, I certainly think they'll give a bit of a fight next time as well. So one more question here from James Downing, who says, did either of you catch any of Diego in action today for Austin? He sent that yesterday. I did not. I think we talked about this beforehand. We didn't see any of the Diego game, but I don't think he did anything notable. He's not in the starting 11, which I think was a little surprising, because when he signed with Austin, it seemed like he was going to be a starter and he was going to be in their plans, and it just did not end up that way. Kellen Rowe also made an appearance for Seattle and also did not do anything of note. So a little bit of a disappointing appearance for two Revs.
I did catch a few minutes of that. I was watching the game while doing a few other things, and I do have to credit Diego. He played 21 minutes, 91% passing accuracy, 19 touches, 1 shot off target. Didn't have that much of an impact in his limited minutes, but I think it's a tough ask coming off the bench against the Los Angeles FC team in an expansion team's first game. And at least his passing stats were decent. With that said, the highlight of that game was the fact that they subbed off Carlos Vela. LAFC subbed off Carlos Vela in the 22nd minute by mistake, because Bob Bradley thought Carlos Vela was asking for a substitution when apparently he actually was not. So there's your opening weekend MLS chaos right there.
Did I captain Carlos Vela on my fantasy team? I bet I did. I usually do that.
Oops.
MLS is back.
Oh God.
We do have one more comment from Macho, who says, do you think Pro is able to wipe their own rears in the morning? I don't think they're smart enough to manage that. We won't go too deep into it, but Jake, you certainly kind of touched on it earlier. I think you are more in the Macho camp than you are the Pro referees camp. So we'll let that comment stand on its own.
I love you, Pro. I love you, Pro. Please do not let Mr. Bizzacco's ref Chicago New England games. Please don't do it. He did it last year. He did it this year. Just don't let him do it. Let him go somewhere else. Please.
And I need to start learning the names of referees. Jake knows all of them down pat. I need to DM Jake, be like, is this going to be a crappy refereed game or not? So I'm a little bit more going into it.
I need to be on. Again, I work overnights. I apologize. So I found out they released the list of referees late. Normally they do it middle of the week, couple days before the games. I think they did it like 2 hours before the game. So I did retweet it, and someone, I don't know who it was like, crap. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wait a minute, didn't we have this last year? I went back. Fotis Bazakos actually did the Revolution. I think it was the home opener against the Fire. It was like March 26th last year. Bazakos was the referee for that game, and I think that game was also kind of a disaster. I forget why it was a disaster. But yeah, particularly Fotis Bazakos does not generally have great games, and we write about him quite often at the Third Yellow. There's a reason why we have a hashtag for him, and it's not a good hashtag.
Another conspiracy we can think about: why does he keep getting assigned to Chicago New England games? So we got two conspiracies: the Connecticut conspiracy, now a refereeing conspiracy. News and notes to run through really quick. Big news, kind of on a Friday news dump type of thing here. Brian Scales, the director of youth development at the Revolution. He was been in that position since November 2010. He apparently was let go by the Revolution. The Revolution did not make a comment or an announcement on it, but Brian Scales took to Twitter and made a statement that it was his last day with the New England Revolution. Sean, what's your reaction on Brian Scales being let go?
Mostly just surprised about the timing. I mean, we knew when Bruce Arena was going to come in that things were going to change. It's not shocking to me that the director of youth development changed. I don't know why you wait till the Friday before the season starts for that to happen, though. And I guess you could, if you're trying to read the writing on the wall, the fact that Firmino and Anking didn't get brought back, and there hasn't been much success from the Revolution's youth academy really since Diego Fagundes and Scott Caldwell. It's not shocking that they opted to make a change. I wonder about why the timing was what it was, and if there's something behind the scenes we don't know about, because it's just bizarre to me, not that it happened, but when it happened.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure how much of this falls on Scales, because for the majority of his time they did not have Revs 2, and I do truthfully believe Revolution 2 would have improved Zach Haribo and even Justin Rennicks maybe a year or two ago. I think that might have helped those players' development. But you mentioned Firmino and Anking leaving. I'm not willing to give up on both of those guys yet. I know Nick Firmino was down with Nashville in preseason. I don't think he signed a contract, but it's interesting that, and he was I think a finalist for Young Player of the Year for USL League One. So I'm not really willing to write him off as a failure, but overall I think he had 7 players signed with the first team over 10 years, and really Scott Caldwell and Diego Fagundes, that was it. In terms of impactful players. So I don't want to say it's out of left field, but it is a bit strange to do this right before the beginning of the season, right after preseason, where you do a preseason flight with out to California and all that. I would expect this move to be made kind of towards the end of the season. But part of me wonders too if they are changing the way they're going to use Revs 2, because you look at Revs 2. Year one, they signed a lot of college players. There was kind of a bit of a gap between the academy and Revs 2. They went out and they signed another group of college kids that were going in the second round or potentially in the first round in the case of Michael DeShields, who's now with DC United. I wonder if maybe Bruce Arena sees more value in signing a bunch of college kids than the current crop of players in the academy who may or may not pan out long term. So it's a bit of an interesting move at this stage, but I don't know. It's hard to know what to make of it and what's happening behind closed doors. Anything to add by anyone or no?
I just wanted to agree with Sean. I thought the timing of it is unfortunate. Brian Scales, he's been here a decade, and I think he deserves more than just a pat on the back and an open door at the beginning of a season. We can argue it's like, well, maybe he wasn't as successful as he should have been. I think overall, with the resources he was given, there's a lot of success to thank him for. And I think that, just letting him go and not reassigning him, I think that hurts the Revolution as an organization, at least in the short term, whether it's recruiting or college or, knowledge base of the area, things like that. I think that that just letting him go is just a bummer. I think it's a bummer. I never met Brian Scales, but I'm a little disappointed on how this went down. And I'm very rarely have said those types of things in the Bruce Arena era. Usually most things are above board. I think this one stinks a little bit.
Other news and notes before we wrap up here today: Earl Edwards Jr., Christian Mafla, and Luis Caicedo all started for Revs 2 yesterday to build fitness. And the Revs lost 3-0. Not a great sign. I did not watch the game. I don't think any of us watched the game. But from what I've been told, no one looked particularly great, especially Mafla. So it's a, big more question marks with those three. We'll see how they progress and if they are with the Matchday 18 next week. And then TSN is reporting that Tajon Buchanan has interest from a number of big European teams, including Juventus, PSV, Sporting Lisbon, RB Salzburg. There was another report a few weeks ago that Tajon Buchanan was drawing interest from Sporting Lisbon, and Sporting Lisbon denied any interest. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And Bruce Arena has said that he has not been contacted by any teams from Europe on Tajon Buchanan. He said that at a press conference earlier this week. So that is one thing to keep an eye on, to see if Tajon Buchanan is still reportedly attracting interest, and how that goes on throughout the season. And a quick correction from last week. I said that Luis Caicedo holds an international roster spot. That is not true. He got a green card. I should have remembered that from a few weeks ago. My bad. So please take note of that as well. Final thoughts here. Jake, anything you want to touch on before we go?
No, just I'm going to try and keep on top of what I'm hoping is a pending appeal for a red card. Hang on, let me check my work schedule. Today was Thursday, which means tomorrow is Friday, which means my off days are officially Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week. So I should be around most of the week. If you have questions on things, we might be able to fire off a big third yellow column at some point in the next 48 hours about everything that was not great about that situation, including a wonderful tidbit from Frank DeLappa of that VAR review took like 3 minutes. And this is not something that, in my opinion, should have taken more than 30 seconds. So we have a lot of little things to talk about the VAR process and how it went bad in depth a little bit more here in the coming days.
Sean, any final thoughts you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Just what I touched on earlier, and that's, the Revolution got a draw on the road to start the season. That's fine. I think a more important game is at home against DC United to show that the Revolution can make Fortress Foxborough a thing this year, because it wasn't a thing last year and there were no fans in the stands, so that didn't help. There'll be limited fans in the stands this year, but what did they win? 2 games at home last year? Something terrible.
It was 2 home wins and 5 road wins. I know that. I forget what there were more draws at home and things like that. But I mean, it was definitely a weird. I also think MLS is back, like designating as the home team and things also threw things off in those numbers. So yeah.
Either way, terrible numbers at home for the Revolution, and they need to be better this year. And DC United, I don't know how good DC is going to be this year, but that's a game that, regardless, the Revolution at home need to win. I don't. Yeah, I don't have a problem with the Revolution getting a tie on Chicago to open the season. I don't think that's a terrible result. It's not a great result. It's just it is what it is. But at home against DC United, if they don't get 3 points out of that game, that's when maybe I start asking some questions, because they need to make Foxborough a difficult place to play this year. It wasn't last year. Again, no fans throws everything off. Limited fans, I'm not sure how much more that helps. Hopefully it does. But that's a key to watch for the Revs this year, is that they pick up maximum points at home against teams like DC United.
And Sean, real quick, you want your 20 seconds on Tottenham?
I'm pretty sick of watching Tottenham this year. After the last game, though, I mean, a 2-2 draw against Everton isn't the worst result in the world. I was looking at their schedule just before the show the rest of the way, and Spurs have such an easy on paper schedule: Southampton, Sheffield United, Leeds, Wolves, Aston Villa, and Leicester to finish the year, that it sucks me back in and gives me some false hope that they could climb their way back into the top 4. But this has been such a terrible season that I cannot allow myself to give myself any hope for these last few games. Hopefully next year will be better, and hopefully there'll be a new coach.
Went over 20 seconds a little bit, but I was enjoying it, so I let it run a little bit long today. So
being a Spurs fan is painful, as always.
Thoughts and prayers, Sean.
I think rooting for Jose Mourinho is painful, so I have some sympathy for you, and at the same time, I have no sympathy for you.
One last comment I just have to make is they went out into that last game with 3 center backs, 2 full backs, and 3 players that could be classified as defensive midfielders, and against an Everton team where they really needed 3 points, and they got 1 point, but which, again, a road draw against Everton is not a horrible result, but I don't know what you're doing when you're going out there with 5 defenders and 3 defensive midfielders. If I'm being generous, 2 of them could be 8s instead of 6s, sure, but that was kind of a shocking lineup choice that I'm surprised even resulted in a draw.
Very over 20 seconds this week. I hope you enjoyed it, Sean. I don't think we're ever doing that ever again. My final thoughts here before we go. We don't say it enough. I just want to give a quick shout out to Bill and Melinda Gates and the foundation that they have and all the good charity work they're doing around the world. Really amazing stuff, and I don't think they get enough credit. So I just wanted to say thank you to Bill and Melinda Gates for all of their charitable work. That wraps us up here today. You can follow Jake at Catanese43. Please follow the Bent Musket at the Bent Musket, and please follow Sean at Sean L. Donahue. You can follow us at Revolution Recap. You can also like our Revolution Recap Instagram page. I need some more friends over there, so please give that a follow. And also our Revolution Recap Facebook page. And if you haven't already, make sure you rate and review us on iTunes. And if you know anyone looking to get into the Revs this year, or they need a Revolution podcast, please spread the word and help us grow. The Revolution will be back next Saturday for their home opener against DC United. We will be back with an episode recapping that game next weekend. And also, we will be releasing the second part of our two-part interview with Jeff Laurentowicz. We released part 1 earlier this week. If you haven't listened yet, please, I recommend you do. Jeff was very upfront, told a lot of great stories from his career, so both episodes are worth checking out. So another 2-episode week for you guys to look forward to. As always, thank you, everyone, for listening, and go Revs.